The Andy Griffith Show once painted a peaceful, innocent world where life in Mayberry felt simple and safe. But behind that warm comedy lies a far darker reality no one expected. Several cast members faced devastating personal battles, while others disappeared or passed away in tragic ways. Keep watching, because what happened to them is more disturbing than you ever imagined. Don Knotts as Barney Fife. Firstly, we have Don Knotts, who portrayed Barney Fife, the overly confident but deeply insecure deputy sheriff whose nervous energy defined Mayberry when he was 36 years old. Born on July 21, 1924, in Morgantown, West Virginia, he brought a unique comedic tension that turned small-town policing into one of television's most memorable contrasts. This role earned him 5 Emmy Awards and secured his place as one of the greatest comedic actors in TV history. Don Knotts passed away on February 24, 2006, at the age of 81 in Los Angeles, due to pulmonary complications linked to lung cancer. He was laid to rest at Westwood Memorial Park, where his grave was later honored with a bronze plaque celebrating his most iconic roles. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $20 million, built from decades of television, film, and voice work. Yet behind the laughter was a life shaped by fear long before fame arrived. As a child in the 1930s, he lived with a father suffering from schizophrenia who once threatened him with a knife, leaving him with lifelong anxiety and severe hypochondria. That internal tension quietly followed him into adulthood, affecting his relationships, including his 17-year marriage to Catherine Metz, which ended in 1964, and later marriages to Lauralee Chuchna and Francis Yarborough that also failed to bring lasting stability. And that emotional weight gradually turned into physical decline. In his later years, macular degeneration left him nearly blind, limiting his ability to perform, while ongoing health complications weakened him further. Despite these struggles, he continued working in projects like Three's Company, 1979 to 1984, and lending his voice to Chicken Little, 2005, refusing to step away completely. His legacy remains tied to a rare ability, turning deep personal anxiety into comedy that felt effortless, leaving behind a character audiences will never separate from the man himself. Andy Griffith as Andy Taylor. Then we have Andy Griffith, who played Andy Taylor, the calm sheriff and widowed father guiding Mayberry when he was 34 years old. Born on June 1, 1926, in Mount Airy, North Carolina, he brought a steady, fatherly presence that gave the series its moral balance. This role became the foundation of his career, later leading to long-term success in Matlock and earning him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2005. Andy Griffith passed away on July 3, 2012, at the age of 86, after a sudden heart attack at his home in North Carolina. He was buried on Roanoke Island within 5 hours in a private ceremony. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $60 million, built across more than 5 decades in television and film. Yet behind that composed image was a life shaped by pressure that began early and never truly faded. Growing up in the late 1920s, he experienced severe poverty, even sleeping in a dresser drawer because his family could not afford a bed. As his fame grew through the 1960s, the expectations became heavier. He was no longer just an actor, but a symbol of the ideal American father. That pressure spilled into his personal life, with his 23-year marriage to Barbara Bray Edwards ending in 1972, followed by another divorce from Salika Casuto in 1981, while reports of a long-term affair with Aneta Corsaut during the show quietly circulated. And those emotional strains were soon followed by physical collapse. In 1983, he was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, leaving him paralyzed from the knees down for 7 months, forcing a long and uncertain recovery. That moment marked a turning point, as he had to rebuild both his health and his career from the ground up. Through Matlock, 1986 to 1995, he returned to television with renewed strength, proving that the calm authority audiences once admired was not just a performance, but something forged through real hardship. In the end, he became more than a television icon. Ron Howard as Opie Taylor. Coming to Ron Howard, who portrayed Opie Taylor, the young son whose innocence grounded Mayberry when he was just 6 years old. Born on March 1, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma, he brought a natural sincerity that strengthened the father-son bond across 249 episodes. This role launched a 6-decade career that eventually earned him 2 Academy Awards as a director. As of 2026, Ron Howard is 72 years old and continues working as a director and producer on major film and documentary projects. His career spans over 60 years, with achievements including 2 Oscars, 7 Emmy Awards, and the National Medal of Arts in 2003. His net worth is estimated at $200 million, reflecting one of the most successful transitions in Hollywood history. Yet growing up under constant public attention created a different kind of pressure. Starting his career before the age of 6, he faced the risk of becoming another child star who failed to adapt to adulthood. Instead, he built a controlled and disciplined life, avoiding the scandals and addictions that affected many of his peers. His marriage to Cheryl Alley in 1975 became a rare point of stability, lasting more than 5 decades in an industry known for instability. And that discipline led directly to his most critical turning point. In 1980, he made the decision to leave acting at the peak of his fame to focus entirely on directing, a move that could have ended his career. Instead, it opened the door to films like Apollo 13, 1995, and A Beautiful Mind, 2001, the latter winning Best Director and Best Picture at the Academy Awards. That shift redefined everything, transforming him from a familiar child actor into a filmmaker with lasting influence. Frances Bavier as Aunt Bee. We have Frances Bavier portraying Aunt Bee, the gentle caretaker and maternal figure who held the Taylor household together when she was 58 years old. Born on December 14, 1902 in New York City, she brought a warm domestic presence that gave the series emotional stability across 10 years on screen. This role earned her an Emmy Award in 1967 and became the defining image of her entire career. Frances Bavier passed away on December 6, 1989, at the age of 86 after suffering from heart failure and complications related to breast cancer. She was buried in Siler City, North Carolina, where she had lived in near isolation for years, her gravestone bearing the name Aunt Bee as a final reflection of the role that defined her life. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at $700,000. Yet behind that warm, comforting image was a far more difficult reality. Throughout the 1960s, she struggled with being typecast, feeling that her identity as an actress had been reduced to a single role, something she openly admitted caused deep frustration. That tension extended onto the set, where her relationship with Andy Griffith was often strained, with both sides later acknowledging frequent conflicts during filming. Off-screen, she never married and had no children, leaving her increasingly isolated as the years passed. And that isolation only deepened after her career came to an end. In 1972, she retired from acting completely and withdrew to a quiet life in North Carolina, rarely appearing in public and spending most of her time alone with dozens of cats. As her health declined, the distance between her real life and the loving figure she portrayed became even more striking. Her story stands as a quiet contradiction. George Lindsey as Goober Pyle. Now, we have George Lindsey, portraying Goober Pyle, the simple-minded but kind-hearted mechanic whose humor brought a different energy to Mayberry when he was 36 years old. Born on December 17, 1928, in Fairfield, Alabama, he added a playful, exaggerated style that made the character instantly memorable through physical comedy and distinct mannerisms. George Lindsey passed away on May 6, 2012, at the age of 83 in Nashville, Tennessee, due to heart failure. He was laid to rest at Oak Hill Cemetery in Jasper, Alabama, survived by his former wife, Joyanne Herbert, and their 2 children, George Jr. and Camden Joe. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $5 million. Yet even at the height of his fame, a different concern followed him closely. Throughout the late 1960s and 1970s, he feared being permanently typecast as Goober, a role so dominant that it overshadowed his work in films like Ensign Pulver, 1964, and voice roles in major Disney productions such as The Aristocats, 1970, and Robin Hood, 1973. And that fear shaped the direction of his later life. While continuing to reprise Goober on Hee Haw for 20 years from 1972 to 1992, he shifted more focus toward charitable work, especially with the Special Olympics, seeking meaning beyond the role that defined him. As time passed, the loss of close co-stars like Andy Griffith and Don Knotts added a quieter layer of reflection to his final years. Howard McNear as Floyd Lawson. Next is Howard McNear, who played Floyd Lawson, the talkative small-town barber whose quiet humor defined Mayberry when he was 56 years old. Born on January 27, 1905 in Los Angeles, California, he created a gentle, slow-paced rhythm that made everyday conversations feel authentic and grounded. The role became the most recognizable image of his career after more than 30 years working across radio, film, and over 100 television appearances. Howard McNear passed away on January 3, 1969, at the age of 63 in San Fernando Valley, California, due to pneumonia complications following a second stroke. He was buried in Los Angeles, leaving behind his wife Helen Spatz, whom he had been married to since 1935, and their son Christopher. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $500,000. But the turning point came right in the middle of his success. In 1963, he suffered a severe stroke that left the entire left side of his body paralyzed, forcing production to completely redesign how his scenes were filmed. From that moment, he could no longer stand or move freely, and nearly every appearance required him to remain seated, often holding a newspaper to conceal the limitations in his left hand. And that physical decline gradually affected more than just his mobility. By the final season in 1967, he began struggling to remember lines, becoming visibly anxious and frustrated during filming, which ultimately led to his departure from the show. What followed was a quiet retreat from the screen, where a once vibrant performer slowly faded under the weight of illness, leaving behind a character that felt effortless. Betty Lynn as Thelma Lou. Then there is Betty Lynn, who portrayed Thelma Lou, the loyal and patient girlfriend whose quiet presence complemented Barney Fife when she was 34 years old. Born on August 29, 1926, in Kansas City, Missouri, she brought a gentle warmth that strengthened the emotional side of the series across 26 episodes between 1961 and 1966. Betty Lynn passed away on October 16, 2021, at the age of 95 after a short illness in Mount Airy, North Carolina. She was buried in her hometown in Missouri. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at $2 million. But long before her peaceful final years, her life was shaped by instability and fear. As a child in the late 1920s, her parents' turbulent marriage involved threats of violence from her father, forcing her mother to hide for safety. A trauma that led to their early separation and left her largely raised by her grandparents. That early emotional foundation carried into adulthood, where she never formed a lasting marriage despite becoming a familiar face on television. And that sense of independence defined her later choices. After experiencing a burglary at her Hollywood home, she chose to leave Los Angeles behind and relocate permanently to Mount Airy, the real-life inspiration for Mayberry, where she spent nearly 15 years living quietly among fans. Rather than chasing fame, she embraced a simpler life, becoming part of the very community her character once symbolized. Aneta Corsaut as Helen Crump, shifting to Aneta Corsaut, who played Helen Crump, the intelligent schoolteacher and later the sheriff's wife who brought emotional depth to Mayberry when she was 30 years old. Born on November 3, 1933, in Hutchinson, Kansas, she added a calm authority that balanced the show's humor with a sense of maturity and realism. Aneta Corsaut passed away on November 6, 1995, at the age of 62 in Los Angeles due to complications from lung cancer. She was laid to rest at Valhalla Memorial Park Cemetery in North Hollywood, leaving no husband or children behind. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at $3 million. Yet behind that composed image was a far more complicated reality. Throughout the 1960s, she was involved in a long-rumored 5-year relationship with Andy Griffith, despite him being married at the time, a situation widely known among cast and crew but never publicly acknowledged during production. At the same time, she remained unmarried throughout her life, a choice that quietly reflected the complexity of her personal circumstances. And that private tension seemed to follow her beyond the spotlight. While continuing steady work in television with roles in Matlock, 1991 to 1992, and other series, she maintained a reserved life away from public attention, never fully escaping the shadow of that hidden chapter. Her story leaves behind a striking contrast. On screen, she represented stability and love, yet off-screen, her life unfolded in far more silent and unresolved ways. Jim Nabors as Gomer Pyle. Now we have Jim Nabors portraying Gomer Pyle, the naive but warm-hearted gas station attendant whose innocence became unforgettable when he was 32 years old. Born on June 12, 1930, in Sylacauga, Alabama, he brought a unique contrast between comedic simplicity and a powerful baritone voice that added unexpected depth to the show. Jim Nabors passed away on November 30, 2017, at the age of 87 at his home in Honolulu, Hawaii. He was survived by his husband, Stan Cadwallader, whom he married in 2013 after 38 years together, marking one of the most private, long-term relationships in Hollywood. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $40 million. But behind that cheerful image was a life shaped by constant concealment. Throughout the 1960s to early 2000s, he lived under the pressure of hiding his true sexuality in an industry and society that offered little acceptance, even denying rumors publicly despite their emotional toll. At the same time, serious health issues emerged, including a life-threatening hepatitis B diagnosis that led to a liver transplant in 1994. And those two struggles quietly defined his later years. After gradually stepping away from acting, he focused on a quieter life in Hawaii, maintaining long-standing traditions like singing at the Indianapolis 500 for over 40 years while managing declining health. His journey reveals a man who brought joy to millions while carrying a truth he could only fully embrace near the end of his life. Jack Dodson as Howard Sprague. Turning to Jack Dodson, portraying Howard Sprague, the mild-mannered county clerk whose awkward sincerity stood out when he was 35 years old. Born on May 16, 1931 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he brought a restrained, understated tone that added a different layer of realism to the town's dynamic. The role extended across both the original series and its spin-off, becoming the most recognizable part of his television career. Jack Dodson passed away on September 16, 1994, at the age of 63 in Los Angeles due to heart failure. He was married to Mary Dodson, a television art director, from 1959 until his death, maintaining a stable marriage that lasted 35 years. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $1 million. Yet behind his calm on-screen presence was a quieter internal struggle. Working alongside a cast filled with dominant personalities, he often felt overshadowed, a contrast that mirrored the timid nature of the character he portrayed. Despite appearing in dozens of television series, including Barney Miller and Happy Days, as well as roles in the Andy Griffith Show reunion specials, he never fully escaped the perception of being a supporting figure. And that sense of being in the background remained a defining thread in his life. While continuing steady work through the 1980s and even reprising his role in reunion projects like Return to Mayberry, he chose consistency over spotlight, building a career that relied more on reliability than fame. His story unfolds less like a rise to stardom and more like a quiet endurance within an industry that rarely rewards subtlety. Hal Smith as Otis Campbell. We come to Hal Smith, who played Otis Campbell, the town drunk whose comedic mischief became a recurring highlight when he was 44 years old. Born on August 24, 1916, in Petoskey, Michigan, his role became his most recognizable work despite a long career in both live action and voice acting. Hal Smith passed away on January 28, 1994, at the age of 77 in Santa Monica, California, from a heart attack. He was preceded in death by his wife Louise Smith, whom he had been married to since 1947 until her passing in 1992, and was survived by his son Terry. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $2 million. Yet the contrast between his real life and his most famous role created unexpected tension. While portraying one of television's most iconic drunk characters, he was known in real life for rarely drinking, but still faced criticism from organizations concerned that the role encouraged alcohol abuse during the 1960s, and that tension became more personal in his final years. After losing his wife in 1992, his health began to decline rapidly, and the emotional impact of that loss marked a clear turning point in his life. Not long after, his story came to a quiet close, leaving behind a character built on humor, but a life shaped far more by resilience and personal loss than audiences ever saw. Burt Mustin as Judd Fletcher. Coming to Burt Mustin, who played Judd Fletcher, the elderly townsman whose presence added authenticity to Mayberry when he was 76 years old. Born on February 8, 1884, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he brought a natural, lived-in realism that made every brief appearance feel believable. The role was part of a remarkable late career that began at age 67 and expanded to more than 150 film and television appearances. Burt Mustin passed away on January 28, 1977, at the age of 92 in Glendale, California. He had been married to Frances Robina Woods for 54 years until her death in 1969, spending most of his life in a long, stable marriage without children. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $300,000. But his path to success came far later than most. After decades working outside the entertainment industry, including engineering and sales, he only entered professional acting in his late 60s, forcing him to take on continuous roles throughout his 70s and 80s to maintain financial stability, including appearances in Leave It to Beaver and The Twilight Zone. And that late start shaped the pace of his entire career. While many actors slowed down with age, he worked relentlessly across television and film, becoming one of the most recognizable elderly character actors of his time, with later roles in All in the Family and Sanford and Son. His story reflects not a rise cut short, but a career that only truly began when most others would have already stepped away. Paul Hartman as Emmett Clark. Then we have Paul Hartman, who played Emmett Clark, the repair shop owner who quietly replaced the town's barber when he was 63 years old. Born on March 1, 1904, in San Francisco, California, he brought decades of stage experience that added a seasoned, understated presence to the later years of the series. This role came after a career that included winning a Tony Award in 1948, marking him as a respected performer long before television. Paul Hartman passed away on October 2, 1973, at the age of 69 in Los Angeles due to a heart attack. He had been married to Grace Hartman from 1923 before their separation, and later to Ann Buckles until their divorce. leaving behind one child. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at $500,000. But stepping into this role came with unexpected pressure. Following the departure of Howard McNear, he entered a position already beloved by audiences, and comparisons were inevitable, creating a level of scrutiny that few late additions to a series could avoid. At the same time, his health had already begun to decline, making the demands of television production increasingly difficult, even as he continued appearing in projects like The Lucy Show and The Doris Day Show. And that combination of pressure and physical limitation shaped his final years. While continuing to take on supporting roles across television, including appearances connected to Mayberry RFD and other guest performances, his appearances became less frequent as his condition worsened. His journey closed not with a dramatic farewell, but with the quiet exit of a performer whose legacy had already been built long before this final chapter. From the heartwarming streets of Mayberry to the realities of time, loss, and change, The Andy Griffith Show, 1960, cast has lived stories far beyond what we saw on screen. Some found lasting success, others faced quiet struggles, and a few left behind legacies that still echo today. Which transformation surprised you the most? And who do you remember best from the show? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more Then and Now stories you won't believe.